Hey everybody, this is Kevin, and welcome to my next build. And as you can see, I've really stepped it up on this one. I've jumped up to a skill level 4, and I'm going to be building a Semroc Mars Lander. Now you're probably wondering why I've got two instructions side by side. These are the instructions that came with it, with the kit, and they're simply double-sided sheets of paper folded in half to make a booklet. So I went to the website and downloaded the manual, and when I downloaded it, this is what I got. So for whatever reason, they've changed things just a little bit on the front design. They both say Semroc in different locations. The picture's actually a little bit different. Looks like the picture of Mars is the same, but the rotation of the rocket is a little different. And just like I said, all the same information, just tweaked a little bit and replaced in different places. But I'm going to set these aside because the way they're folded up is going to kind of be cantankerous to work with, so I'm going to save these, and I'm going to be working off the copies that I printed. Now what makes it tricky about this is I'm going to have to kind of read it forward and then read it backward. For example, it starts here in this column, and the next page we'll go to step 1, next page down the line on the right, and just alternating left and right. And then when I get to the end of this page, 28, then I jump up to 29, and then I start working backwards. So I'm definitely going to utilize these little check boxes and check them off as I complete them, otherwise I'll get confused. But anyway, that's kind of preliminary organization stuff. There's a lot of parts to this kit. I mean, there's a lot to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the inventory offline. Otherwise I will bore you to death going through every one of these little parts. So I will show you the parts though as they come out of the kit. You do get the main rocket body that everything is based on, and then a beautiful carved out and smooth balsa nose cone. That is a beautiful piece of craftsmanship there from the factory. Then you get two balsa sheets, looks like maybe 3 32nd inch fins and struts and parts there. 3 cardboard sheets with centering rings, extra little miscellaneous arms and struts and you name it. So all sorts of cardboard parts. You get a slew of, looks like 5, 6, 7, 8 dowels. A couple different sizes in there. A soda straw lengths launch lug to work with. We'll be cutting that up, no doubt, in time. You get a little parts bag with some other launch lugs, rubber bands, some what we use in the RC airplane business, fuel tubing. So that's kind of interesting. Then you get kind of the core body. Not the core, but the outer body. Looks like this is a 3-inch piece, maybe 3.5-inch diameter tubing. You get 2 other rings. Not quite sure what those go to yet, but I'm sure I'll find out soon enough. And we get a Semroc parachute with shroud line. A bag with shock cord, Kevlar, elastic, and the eye hook, and looks like the thrust ring, and a little eyelet. And then last but not least, you get this cardstock. Looks like it's all your alignment gauges and guides to wrap around and to cut things from. So this is quite the utilitarian piece there. All right, so that is oh no, I missed several things actually. Decal sheet. And you get all these, they call it embossed wraps. I'm not sure if it's I think it's plastic that's got these impressions embossed into it. Not quite sure if the light can show those impressions. So looks like that's probably the main, maybe the upper portion. Actually no, it looks like it may be around the main body, this part here. And then up toward the nose, and you got some other wraps. So all sorts of plastic, and then you've got one little sheet. And be careful when you open your kit. This little sheet of these little rectangular strips and they are very fragile and they're already starting to fall out. So just keep a track of those and don't lose them, because I can see those being hard to replace. So that's the kit in a nutshell. We're going to jump right into the assembly. Again, I'm going to skip the inventorying all these individual little items. They look like they're all there. I don't see anything missing out of the punch outs. So with that, let me clean off the bench and we will begin. Okay, after inventorying and everything, that's steps 1 and 2, going through all the preparation and everything. But actually, where the rubber meets the road starts in step 3, and that's preparing the balsa fins. So they want you to go ahead and sand the fins before you punch them out of their balsa sheet. So let me just go ahead and do some quick sanding here. Okay, then we want to go ahead and punch them out. I'll take an X-Acto knife and just kind of follow the pre-laser cut lines. Okay, then what they want you to do is go ahead and take 4 of them at a time. And since there are 8, we can do this twice. But take 4 of them, get them mated up against each other evenly. Like so. And then sand them all together. Look how uneven those are at the front. The back's even. Look how different those are at the front. So we'll just kind of sand these till they're all equal. Okay, I'm gonna actually cut these to make it a little quicker and easier. They're all pretty fine, but I'm going to find the shortest one and then cut to that length. There we go. Now they're all even and they're still very, very, very sharp. So there's 4, and we'll do the other 4. Okay, now to make sure they're all cut equally, let me go ahead and line one of the other ones up with it, and I'll match it to that length. There we go. So now we've got 8 equal and sanded and smooth fins. There we go. Okay, we're going to set those aside. And now we got to get into step number 5, which is removing the fiber gear housing covers. So let me take this sheet, and you'll notice one of the centering rings popped out. If you ever lose anything, throw it in a box or a container of some sort so you don't lose things, which is where I had to put that. But here are our housing, our gear housing covers. Let me see if they punch out. Okay, now before I run and grab my glue, I'm just gonna show you how these go together. So we're gonna take one of these gear housing covers, and we're gonna take 2 of these fins that we've cut out and sanded, and the fat portion of it, well, actually should say the shortest of the 2 lengths, are gonna line up and glue to the base of these covers here, like so. And they're going to glue in just like that, parallel to one another. And yeah, so that'll, let me go grab some glue and then we're going to slap those together. Okay, using some ordinary wood glue, I'm going to take 2 of these fins, and again, the shortest of the 2 long sides, the shortest one is what we're actually going to glue onto this cover. We're going to run a very thin bead of glue down this edge. Oh, if it was open. Okay. I didn't put much, and I'm going to take my finger and just sort of spread it out what we got. We're going to glue one end down. Now you want to make sure it's flush with the outer edge. So I'm going to lay it down this way, make sure we're at the end, and then as it dries, just make sure it's vertical. There we have it. Okay. Do the same to this one. Make sure they're even. Okay, so there's one complete, and I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 off camera. In fact, here, let me show you what it looks like up close. Okay, I'm going to do the other 3 off camera now. Okay, now this next step is a little unique, and I've already done a little bit of prep work ahead of time. I went ahead and punched out the 4 gear struts, and they're simple balsa sheets, and they call for rounding off the leading edge of 1, and I went ahead and did that off camera. Not quite sure if it'll focus, but I rounded out the edge opposite the side with the notch cut into it. So what they ask you to do is to take 2 rubber bands and run them around that little notch and then over, and this is a temporary position for them, but we're just gonna strap them over like so, and then you take 1 piece of 1/8 inch dowel, per fin. So there's a total of 4 dowels. And you're gonna make the one edge, you're gonna glue it flush to the thin end there. And then we're gonna glue it on, and then they want you to cut off 9/16 of an inch past this intersection. Now I'm not gonna do the cutting until after the glue is set and dry, because I think that'll just kind of simplify things. And then I'm not going to cut this angle into it. After the glue dries, I'm going to sand the angle into that dowel so it'll match up with the with the fin itself, or with the gear strut. So now that I got the 2 rubber bands on, I'm going to take some wood glue and also have some masking tape ready. In fact, let me go ahead and do that now. I'm going to get 3 strips of tape ready to wrap around the dowel to help hold it in place. Okay. Take our wood glue, and I'm going to do one of these on camera, and I'm going to do the other 3 off camera. But I'm just going to show you, for the sake of illustration, how we're going to do it. So there we go. And be careful, don't get it in that notch and get the rubber bands wet with glue. That would make life much more difficult down the road. And just kind of smear it with your finger. Wipe off any excess. Paper towel. Okay. Now I'm going to take the one dowel, and I'm going to line it up on the edge and then glue the rest down. So once I get that lined up, I'm going to extend just a little bit over so when I sand it down, I'll have something to work with. And then I'm just going to take tape, center it best I can, push it down, and pinch it there. Okay, that's one end. Let me do this end. Used a little bit too much tape, but that's okay. Okay, I'll pull that down, and we'll put one last piece down here on this end. All right. So now that this is set to dry, I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 again off camera, and then we're going to come back and we're going to sand the edges off and cut this to the proper length. So we're going to set that aside to dry for a little while, and we'll come right back to it. Okay, so I've removed the masking tape, and the dowel is securely glued to the gear strut. One thing I did off camera already was I sanded, using my belt sander, the dowel. I sanded it down to match the tip of the gear strut, so that's nice and flush there. And the other thing I already did was I marked 9/16 of an inch on the dowel. So you just take your ruler and measure from the base of that fin there, and measure 9/16 of an inch out. And then I'm simply going to put it in my miter box. Take my saw, put it right on that mark, and just pull through. May take a couple passes. Oh, there we go. So just like that. Now save this, because we're going to end up using this now to create this piece here. And we'll do that in the next step. And I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3, so we'll have all 3 just set like this. Okay, the next step is pretty straightforward. And I've already gone ahead and done one just to show you the final result. But the next step will be gluing a dowel onto the base part of that gear strut. But let me show you how I did it. You take the remainder of the wood that we cut earlier, and I went ahead and photocopied the marking guide sheet out of the instructions so I could work on this. But you just lay it down on brace B, lay your piece down, and then just using a pencil, go ahead and mark some lines at the angle that they have on the guide, and then take this over to a jigsaw, belt sander, whatever it takes to cut it and get those angles sanded into the ends. And then once you get that done, then you just simply take some wood glue and glue them into position there on that gear strut. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these up and then glue them onto the remaining fins. And also you're supposed to release the rubber bands to take some tension off them, so they've all been released as well. So that'll be the next step, and then we'll catch up with you in the next section. Okay, this next step can be kind of tricky if you don't take your time, read the instructions carefully, and you should be able to do it with no problems, but make sure you read. One thing I did was, again, I made a copy of the guide, and strut brace C, you're supposed to take the 2 remaining dowels that are left in your kit and cut them to match the angles and length of strut C, or brace C right here. And after you do that, you get 4 identical pieces. You mark on the end with the sharpest cut into the angle. You need to make a mark 3/4 of an inch in, and then another mark at 2 inches in. And that's where we're going to apply some masking tape to thicken the dowel up a little bit so we can install our strut covers, which are actually these little launch lugs that we saw earlier. So I've got those marked down already. Now what I want to do is take a strip of masking tape, and I'll show you how I cut my strips. I mean, you can do this any way you want, but this is just the way I decided to do it. But you're supposed to measure 1 1/4 inch long, so I'm going to set this on my template here on my cutting board. Follow a straight line. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to look across, and 1 1/4 up is right here, so I'm going to measure that across and get my 1 1/4 inch lengths in. You know what, I'm going to do that again. I messed up my cut. Okay. You take a couple inches of masking tape and set them on your cutting board, because it's got measurements that we can use. And just follow a line there that's on the board. And then take your straight edge, clean up some of the edges. I'm going to clean up this bottom line to make it straight. Okay, and then also 1 1/4 inches up. So there's 1 1/4 on that side, 1 1/4 on this side, and then just draw that across, peel up the remaining piece, get rid of this little bottom portion. Okay. Now we want to measure 1/8 inch strips. We want to cut 4 per piece, and then we'll have to do it again for the other 2. But so what I like to do is just, you can use now your marks across the top and bottom, and let's get one good straight line here. Okay, so let's remove this. Get it out of the way. Now I'm on an 1/8 inch mark, which is good. Now I can angle or measure from that 1/8 inch to this 1/8 inch. Make a cut. Okay, then move in 1/8 of an inch. Do the same thing again. Move in 1/8. Do it again. And I can do one more cut out of this strip of tape. Okay, so I can peel off that remainder so we don't get confused by it. So there's 4 strips I can use, 2 per dowel. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our dowel here, get one of the 1/8 inch strips, lay it on the inside of the mark that we made at the 3/4 inch, wrap it, and then just wrap this all the way around, like so. Then take our next strip, lay it down at the 2 inch mark that we made. Just roll that up. Okay. So now we've got the two inner parts that thickened up the dowel, which will allow one of the launch lugs to slip right onto that point. So I'm going to take some wood glue. It's amazing how quickly this seals over the top. Okay, I'm just going to run a small bead around the first one, bring some down on the inside, and then a bead around the back side. Okay. Okay, get a launch lug, slip it on, and then just center it and twist as you go, and center it on those two strips of masking tape. And then you're gonna have a little fillet at the back end, so you just go ahead and spin that and wipe the excess off. And then again, just center your launch lug best you can, and there you have it. So there's one strut cover over the strut, and just do the same to the other three, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now I realize that I'm really breaking this video up into a lot of small segments, but that's because there are a lot of individual steps to this process, and before I do each one, I want to take a step back and look and analyze and make sure I'm doing it the right way, because as you can see, it's a pretty involved process. And now obviously you see I've jumped the gun here. I've already assembled one of these fins, but I wanted to make sure I knew off camera how to do it and that I was doing it right. So now I'm going to show you how I got to this point. So we're going to take one of our dried fins, and the instructions call for measuring 2 7/16 from this corner in on this dowel. So take my ruler, line it up to the end, and right at 2 7/16, which is just shy of the 2.5 inch mark. I'm going to draw a little line there. Now I'm going to take the arm and position this corner on that notch that I made, and it should even up at the very top with that dowel there. So once you get it in position, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple of little marks so I know where to apply the glue. Just lightly draw a line outlining the arm piece. Okay, so now I've got a place of location for the glue. So then you just simply take some glue, put a little dab on that piece. That's actually a lot more than I wanted. And then just a little bit of smearing around here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a a popsicle stick, and use it to spread the glue up to those marks that I made. I really don't want to have too much of a mess out beyond where the glue needs to be. So kind of draw the glue out to those lines that I drew. Just like so. And then take our arm and line it right back up on that notch mark that we made. And then position the top corner up here. And make sure it's flush on the bottom with the dowel. And firmly push it into place. And if there's any excess sticking over, we can sand that off later on. But for now, just go ahead and let that dry. Now, one thing to make life a little bit easier is if you get a clothespin, just in case the dowels weren't lined up exactly right, this will help hold the piece in position. We'll do one on that end and one on this end, just like so. So, and you can see it actually squeegeed out some excess glue. Let's just kind of clean up that edge. And drawing that out. There we go. And just set that aside to dry for a little while. Now, While that dries, I'm going to go ahead and show you the next step with a piece that's already dried. Go ahead and take one of your struts here, and going down to, we're on step 11, we want to take this gear support and glue it up against the dowel that's glued to the arm right at that juncture there, and then glue this down at the end. Now mine came up about a 1/16 of an inch short, and I may decide to sand that back to the dowel, or just maybe glue on a little piece of dowel to make that extend out to the edge. I'll figure that out after I glue it on. But that's the next step, and have some cute clothespins on standby. So I'm just going to set a little bit of glue in this corner. And a little bit down on this end. Okay, now you want to use the end that's got the cover on it, which is actually an old launch lug. But we're going to use that end up toward the arm, so press it up into that corner. And see, the best way to do this is probably going to be to get a clothespin up at the top here, like that. And then I'm going to use a piece of masking tape for the end down here, because it's not wanting to stay. There we go, just like so. Okay, I'm going to do this to the other 3 fins, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, step 11 is a very similar step like we've been doing. We just need to take the other arm and now glue it on the other side of the fin to mate up with the other side, which basically traps that strut in the middle. So what I'm going to do is just line it up. I'm going to basically eyeball it from the top and the bottom, and then draw my trace lines. And then take some glue and just put it on the end of these dowels here. Don't want to put too much on. And again here. And I'll take my popsicle stick and just spread it like I did before. Okay. And I've already got a couple clothespins on standby. Okay. Drop that into position. Line it up. Okay, take one clothespin on this end and one on this end. Okay, and there we go. I'm just gonna wipe that down. I'm actually gonna get some, you can do it with your finger. I was gonna say Q-tips will work good too, but there you go. So I'm gonna set that aside. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other 3, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, step 12 in the manual is cutting out the strut straps from the pattern sheet. Now, one thing I did was when I first opened the kit up, I took the pattern sheet out and I scanned this into my computer, so I've got a copy, and I can keep this original, and I've printed out on cardstock that same sheet. So I'm going to cut these out of a copy on cardstock, just so I've always got, you know, the original in case I ever need to make any repairs or if I want to build a clone or anything like that. So I'm just going to cut these 4 strips out, and I've got it scanned in as a PDF. And if you do make a copy, make sure the ratio is the same. You don't want it different sizes. You want to make sure you're getting the exact same size on the copy. And I apologize if you hear some background noise, but over the last few days I've been building out in the garage here, and it's been 109, 110 degrees outside, and in the garage it's just even hotter. It's like an oven. So I got the garage door open right now, so you may hear an occasional vehicle pass by, or there's a flagpole across the street that you hear making a racket, but I need to keep some airflow through here. It's extremely hot. So there's my 4 little straps. I shouldn't say straps, I guess I should say wraps. That's the term they use. So again, just a copy of cardstock, so I can keep the original intact. Now what they call for is to wrap this. I'm gonna kind of fold it in half, but not, I don't want to seal that edge because it has to wrap around this dowel like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some glue and then use a clothespin to clamp it down. Now you got to be very careful not to get any glue on those rubber bands. So you know what, as a precaution, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just tape them back and out of the way. You may want to consider doing that just to get them away from the glue completely, because this is something you really can't afford to mess up because they're already sort of secured in there. So I'll go ahead and do that to all 4 of them right now. And I'll glue the first one down, and then once I kind of prove to myself that I know what I'm doing on camera, I'll go ahead and do it off camera for the other 3, but just to give you an illustration of how I'm doing it. So again, we want to get these rubber bands away from the glue. Okay, so we'll start with this one. Okay, take some wood glue. I guess it's going to kind of be like the way you do like an Estes shock cord mount, where you kind of just smear it around. So I guess you're just going to make a mess. That's really the only way to do it. And I assume that some's going to ooze out on us a little bit here. So we want it up against the notch, but not sticking out over the leading edge. Just like so. Okay. Okay, so I got the first one done, and I will go ahead and do the other 3 off camera, and then we're going to actually start working on the landing pads themselves. So we're going to abandon the struts here for a little bit. Okay, these next few steps I'm going to combine all into one. Just instead of breaking up this into several segments, I'm just going to build one of the landing gear pads, and then I'm going to go and finish the other 3. But I'm going to, like I said, combine probably 3 or 4 steps into one. But what you need to do is take one of your cardboard rings, and then take a number 5 disc, that's a punch out from the cardboard sheet, and also a number 6 circle, but it's got a slot in it. Also have a number 7 on standby. There's a little bit smaller, not to confuse with the 7. It's a little bit smaller than the 5. Yeah, 7 smaller than the 5. And also go ahead and have these embossed plastic strips ready to go. We're going to wrap the ring with that plastic wrap once we get it all assembled. So pretty simple and straightforward. Just take your glue, and very thin. This needs to be super thin because it'll ooze out. And we want it to dry relatively quickly too. And the more glue we put on there, the longer it'll take to dry. So just take one of your number 5s, set it on there and center it. You can just eyeball the centering as best you can. Okay, then same thing on this side. Spread a little glue around the ring. Wipe some extra off. Okay, then you take your number 6, place it on there, and just kind of by feel, you can pretty well center it with number 5. Just kind of eyeball it, but yeah, this is a pretty straightforward process there. Okay, then go to your smaller one, your number 7, and just put a small dab of glue. Like that. I mean, that's all I'm literally doing, just a little dab. And then place the number 7 on there. Kind of twist it to help spread it a little bit. Center it best you can. Okay, we'll let that sit just for a second. Now we want to take our plastic embossed strip here, and you'll notice one side is smooth, the other one has the ribs in it. You want the ribs facing out. Moving on to the next sheet here. You want those ribs exposed, giving a little bit of contour to it. Now, I'm going to attempt something. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it, but once I get this on, I'm going to lay a rubber band around it to help hold it down, because I'm not sure how well this will hold itself down to the glue. So we're going to go ahead and run our glue here around the centering ring. Use my popsicle stick to spread the glue. Okay. Take our plastic strip. Again, make sure the ribs are facing out. And lay it in. Wrap it around. Yeah, I'm not sure how you would be able to do this without running a rubber band or something around it. But there we go. Okay, so just going to let that set for a few minutes, and I'll take the rubber band off before the rubber band becomes permanently attached. So that's the process. I'm just going to go ahead and repeat this 3 more times, and we'll have the landing legs complete. Okay, I'm going to combine a couple steps here, steps 14 and 15. I've already got the landing gear pads all assembled and glued down. I will tell you one thing, I cheated on the other 3 when it came to wrapping that plastic around. I ended up using some medium CA glue and some accelerator, and it went on a heck of a lot easier than when I was using the wood glue and rubber band. So anyway, food for thought, you may want to consider using CA glue. And I'm also going to use CA glue to glue the leg into the pad, just like this. So I will go ahead and spray a little bit of the kicker up in the pad, like that. Let it kind of soak in, and then I'm going to take my super glue and just put a few drops on the end here. And you got to be careful and make sure when this glues in, it glues in absolutely perpendicular. So I'm going to set this in here, and I'm going to eyeball from the side and make sure we're perfectly perpendicular, 90 degrees to the workbench, straight up and down. Okay, and then that pretty much it glues up right away because I've got the accelerator. And then the other step I'm going to include is I'm going to go ahead and glue the gussets on, which will actually give us some pretty good support as well. And I'm going to use the CA glue on that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pour some CA down in the gap there. And then set this into position. And it looks like, yeah, we do have a little bit of a fillet, which is fine. That'll give it a little more strength as well. But I'm going to take my popsicle stick and just sort of spread that out a little bit. Okay, that's one. Flip it over and we'll do the other side. Take our other gusset. And like I have with the other steps, I'm going to go ahead and do the other three off camera. But here you got an idea of how it all goes together. So there we go. The gussets are on. The pads are secured to the legs. We are making progress. Okay, this next step I've already gone ahead and done a few off camera. But a combination of things. One is cut the remaining dowels into the length on the guide sheet. It's listed there, and you should have 4 pieces left over that are long enough to cut. So I've got those 4 pieces cut. You want to sand the tips, kind of round them off so they're not sharp, because eventually they're going to go into the fuel tubing and we don't want to risk cutting the tubing. So make sure you round those off till they're nice and soft and smooth. And I've already made 3 hinges so far, but I want to show you how I did it. Very straightforward. You take the fuel tubing that they give you. This is actually model airplane fuel tubing they use. And you take one of the plastic beads and just sort of get it started in there, get it going. And then I just took one of the dowels that I cut that's rounded and just kind of help push it in. And you want to push it till about the halfway point, which is right there. And then go ahead and pull the dowel back out. And now you've got your hinge ready to go. Now what they call for is taking some wood glue and apply glue to about 1/2 inch on the tip of this. Like so. And then just with your finger, just sort of rub it in. Just like that. And that'll kind of roughen up the wood a little bit. It'll help it stick to the inside the tubing a little bit better. So I'm going to set that aside. And then you want to do the same thing to the dowel that's on your landing leg. So let me put a drop on there. And just like before, take your finger. And it's a messy job, but that's why you always want to have paper towels nearby. And then just like that. Okay, we'll let that dry. And then once it's dry, we're going to go ahead and insert this onto here and onto that other little dowel piece. So pretty straightforward. I'm going to do the rest of the other fins or legs as well as these dowels, and we'll be ready to go. Okay, the next several steps are going to be combined into one video. like I've done previously. We're at the point now where we're going to build up our motor mount, and I'm going to combine a little bit of what they say to do and a little bit of what I want to do to strengthen and kind of adapt some of my own ideas into the building. The shock cord specifically is one. They do recommend mounting the Kevlar to the motor mount, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and I've never seen this done before. It's a new idea. I want to try it out on this. So what we're going to do, let's go ahead and follow the steps first. And I'm going to start out by taking the engine mount marking guide, which I cut out of the template. And actually, this is a copy from the scan that I had made. And I think it's actually better to do this with regular paper, because regular paper definitely wraps a lot easier than the cardstock would. So I'm going to go ahead and tape that. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly why. I've tried to read ahead. They say to put a mark at every arrow, which I'm going to do. But then they say only to draw a line on the A, which is the line in which the engine hook is going to be placed upon. But I'll go ahead and follow the instructions up to this point and see what all these little markings are for. I suspect it has something to do with the centering ring holes for the landing gear struts, but I still don't see the full purpose of that. But I'm going to put a little A here so I know which one it is. Okay, I'm going to slide this off, and I'm going to take my Estes body tube marking guide, and I'm going to lay the marks I made from the letter A right there, and just draw a line full length. Okay, so that's the line for our engine hook. Now the instructions call for, let's see, we want to measure 1.5 inches from the top. So let's go ahead and I'm going to set it at 2 and then mark it at a 1/2 inch line. Okay, so that's the point we're going to make the slit for the engine hook. Okay? I'm going to take an X-Acto and we're just going to make a 1/8 inch slit. Now, real quick, if you notice, by putting the hook in that position, that extends maybe 1/4 inch, not quite 1/2 inch out over the end of the tube. So I'm going to cut my slit. They call for a 1/8 inch slit. Okay. Pop that in. There we go. And it should lay down nicely right on that line that we made. Okay, now here's where I'm going to modify things a little bit. They have you take this ring and just slip it over, and that is all that there is to the engine hook. Like, literally that is it. All the centering rings are up forward of the hook, but this is the only thing keeping the hook down. And the only thing keeping the engine in is that little tip that sticks up on the inside. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've cut a little thrust ring out of an old engine casing, and I'm going to insert this down to act as a thrust ring and also to give support to that hook. So that's one modification there. The other modification is let me get my Kevlar here and show you. I'm actually going to insert the Kevlar under the hook. Like that. I'm going to tie a knot right here. Okay? To prevent this from ever lifting up and undoing it, the knot, or not undoing the knot, but releasing the cord, is I'm going to take, if you remember when I built my generic E2X, I saved this little ring, and I'm glad I did, because I'm going to slide this right up to the edge of the hook to help keep the hook from ever wanting to lift up and out, and that'll keep the shock cord right where it needs to be. Then I can go ahead and insert the centering rings one by one, and if you notice, the centering rings each have a little notch. Now that notch is going to be right in line with that line that we drew, and will allow for the Kevlar cord to pass through it. And there's a notch on both centering rings. Now this one, it has no notch, but it has a hole, so it's going to eventually deflect up and out to that little hole right there. So that's the plan, that's the idea. We're still going to use this though, because this is what's going to allow the hook to only bend out so far, which is important. So okay, I'm going to take this offline and glue it up, and then we'll come back to the video. Okay, I've done a few things off camera, but I'll get to those here in a second. But what I want to do is do step 24 with you, and that involves sanding a curved inlet on these guides so they'll fit snugly up against the body tube. The way I'm going to do that is I took some sandpaper and I just taped it down to a spray can, and I'm going to use that as the curvature. And they give you two pieces, one cardboard, one balsa, of an insert. You're to glue those together, because once together they are the perfect thickness for fitting inside these guides, and that way you can pinch and not, risk damaging anything. So what you want to do is just make sure that it's flush, like so, and then you just want to take it up against your sandpaper and just sand it a little bit until you get a little curve built into. Make sure you go straight up and down. Okay, it's slight, but I don't know if you can see, there's a curve in there now, which is what you want, because that'll make the adhesion to the body tube a lot easier. So I'm going to do the other three off camera, but before I do, I want to show you what I've done already, which is the next step, step 25. Take your large body tube and take your template that they give you and wrap it around the tube, and then you are to make cutouts for the gear opening at each location, as well as making a mark on each of these 4 arrows at each section. So I wrapped my tube with that, made the marks, and then I made my cuts very carefully with an X-Acto. But you can see each opening is centered between the 2 lines that are drawn down, and you cut all but the segment here that's 1/4 inch from the edge. So all these little flaps will go in, but they're hinged at that point right up there. So you see in all 4 of these locations. So now these will be ready to glue these on once I get these all completed and sanded. So again, I'm going to do the rest of the sanding off camera, and then we'll get back to gluing these onto the body tubes. Okay, now that I've got all 4 of these sanded down with the correct curvature in them to match up with the body tube, it's time to glue these on. Now what they ask you to do is, before you glue them on the forward end, the upper end of the tube, make a little mark 1/8 of an inch from the top, because that's where we're going to be gluing these up to that point. So I'm going to line these up over each cutout within those lines I drew, and I'm going to line the leading edge up right on that 1/8 inch mark. And if you do that, the back end should be flush. So ideally that's a good test on everything to make sure everything's measured correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and do this on all 4, It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to take some wood glue. And just run a little bead down each of the long, and it's going to be the longest of the sides. So it's going to be the side that you just finished sanding as well. Okay. And I'm going to take my finger and just sort of spread the glue. Make sure I get good coverage. Okay. Then again, I'm going to line the leading edge of this up to that 1/8 inch mark. And then lay it down right between the marks on the tube. And let that sit. Now, I'm going to have to hold this a little bit, just for a few moments till it really starts to hold its own. So I'm going to do that. I showed you how I did this one. I'm going to do the other 3 off camera and then we'll get back. Okay, the next step is to glue the launch lug onto the main body tube that'll run through the inside of the rocket. Now the instructions call for using a cutout guide for the launch lug, and it seems like a lot of work to cut that out, wrap it up, mark the 2 points, and then draw a line, when all you have to do is take a marking guide, a door frame, or anything straight and just draw a center line down the tube. So that's what I'm going to do. Just like that. Now I'm going to go back over and scuff up just a little bit where that line is. Not so much to erase the line itself, but just to take off the waxiness that is on these tubes. There, it's pretty rough right through there. Then I'm simply going to take my wood glue, run a line right down the line we marked. And I got to be careful not to use too much. There we go. And the instructions call for, because the launch lug is longer than the tube, glue one end flush with the end, and then the other end will extend out, obviously. Now I'm going to wipe off a little bit near the tip so I can see the line, and a little bit down here just so I can see the line. It's still tacky, so I didn't remove all the glue. That's going to make doing this a lot easier, so I'm going to set that down. Okay, line that up. There we go. And you always want to sight down from above to make sure it is straight. There we go. Now let that set up and harden. And we may go in and put some fillets down later just to give it a little bit more strength, but we're going to let that harden up first. Alright. And before I go, I do want to show you the main body here. I've got all those landing gear bays already constructed and glued up. So I just want to give you an update on how that's looking. That came out real well. Alright, so now we're going to let this sit aside to dry, and then we'll do some fillets later on. Okay, the next step is going to be gluing the shroud. Now, it's simply a matter of rolling it up and then taping the overlap at the joint. Now, to make the overlap a little bit easier, I went ahead and took some masking tape and I ran it along the seam line that I want the glue, this end, to be butted up against. So now that I've got a reference with the tape, I'm simply going to lay a bead of CA glue down along here, I'm going to spray some kicker on the bottom of this end here. That way we get a pretty immediate contact. I don't want it to be moving around or sliding on me. I want it to hold. So once we get there, then we can simply lay it down up against our tape, and that'll hold. And then I've got a couple of clothespins on standby to clip it to hold it. But it should be pretty immediate. So pretty straightforward. So I'm going to take my CA glue, run a very, very thin bead. You don't want a lot, because otherwise it'll squeegee out on you. That's all we need. Okay, now I'm going to take some kicker and spray that side. And again, just run it up to my tape. Okay. Same position. Now I'm going to take the tape off just to make sure we've got a good seal on along that line. Okay. Gonna use my fingers, kind of flatten it out best I can. There we go. That is one quality glue joint right there, and it's straight. In fact, I can remove these. It's already holding. A little corner kind of popped up on me there. I'll set that back in with some super glue later. But there's our shroud. Pretty nice. I'm very pleased with that process. So again, give yourself a reference by using the tape and go from there. I'm just going to fill in along that seam. Maybe a drop of thin CA would just run nicely and seal that up. So that's how I accomplish that. And the same step will be applied to when we do the lower shroud. I'm sorry, the upper, because there's two shrouds on this. So same process. Quite a lot has been done off camera only because I really needed to take my time and kind of figure things out on the go. And so I kind of wanted to show you the final product, not the in-process product. One thing I did on the main shroud line was I did install this brace right along the junction where the seam is. Just on the inside, is you want to attach that brace, and you want to make sure that the notch in the brace is toward the bottom end, the fatter end. So we're going to get back to this here in a second. I also did the ascent stage already. As I said, I glued it up the same way, same process. But I've also gone ahead and glued in the bulkhead in the base of it. Now, I'm glad I did not do this on camera because this took 30 minutes, literally. Finite sanding on that ring to get it to fit just inside and be flush with the shroud, so there's nothing sticking out. And that took a lot of patience and sanding. So I finally got it in, and then I glued it from the inside down along in that. So there's more or less a fillet of medium CA all along in there. So this is sturdy and ready to go. But for the time being, we are done with this. The next step though is we're going to install that bulkhead here in a minute, but we want to install this ring on the top portion of the shroud. Now you got to be very, very careful when you do this because it only goes one way. You want to make sure this notch here is at the bottom, and then this little cutout is facing the 130 position. If it's facing that position, it's going to be backwards and wrong. So you want this little notch up toward the top right corner. And then actually we're going to lay this down and drop this in within there. You can simply slide that little notch on your brace and allow it to fall in and kind of push out on the shroud, which is what you want. and then it's flush on the bottom side. Now, if it's good to go, which it is, we're gonna go ahead and glue it. And you want to make sure you're on a flat surface with wax paper, which we have. So in this case, we're gonna take some medium CA. I'm just gonna do a little tack. I'm gonna do one little drop. That's more than a little drop, but anyway. And then just squirt that so it'll hold its position, and do the same thing on this side. And I'm just going to run this bead around, making a fillet as I go. And you want to stop short of those little notches. And I'll show you why here in a second. Because we're going to fill those notches in with another brace. Go. Okay, so now we've got that bulkhead. So now we're getting some perfect circular shrouds, which is ideal. Okay, now that we've got that in, we can take these bracings. Now these are identical pieces, and there's really no top or bottom, but these braces simply fit into those little notches down there at the bottom and fit in like so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bead of glue along the seam here. Or along the long edge. And let's put a little bit in the corner. And lay it in perpendicular. Okay, good. And then do the same to this brace. Okay. There we go. There you are. So if you look at instructions, now we have exactly mimicked the illustration. Our notch is facing the correct direction. And now the next thing, I'm going to let that set aside to dry for a bit, is this bulkhead. Now this one's tricky because if you remember when we made the other one, the centering ring slipped into the ring. Well, in this case, the centering ring doesn't go inside. This portion simply glues to the outer edge. Now, what keeps it straight? Well, we're gonna have to be very careful how we run the glue so this doesn't go oblong or oval shape on us. Okay, we want this, just like before, we want this notch facing down, this notch facing the 130 position, and this is going to glue on top of it. Now, my idea for doing this is I'm going to set just a dab of glue in one position just to give us a reference to hold. And I'm going to get that perfectly flush. Just like so. Let that sit for a second. Oops. And that jumps out at me. Okay. So my idea to keep it in position is to roll it on its side as we run the glue along. Okay, so I'm gonna lay my fillet. And then as you can see, it's perfectly flush where it was on the table. Okay, and we just roll it a little bit more. There we go. So now we've got this bulkhead. Now this bulkhead, the ring is sticking out just a little bit, so eventually we're gonna have to sand that smooth to be flush with the ring, but overall, we've met the dimensions of the centering ring, which is ideal. There we go. A quick update. What you guys probably don't know is behind the scenes to this, in between each of these segments, sometimes it's minutes that go by, sometimes it's hours that go by, sometimes it's days that go by, and in this case, I think it's been a week or two since the last segment was filmed. But the reason is because I've ordered some items and I'm still waiting for them to come in the mail. And I'm briefly going to show you kind of what I'm doing. In the meantime, I want to show you I have started primering the landing legs. Here's an unprimered one, here's a primered one. Once this dries, I'll sand it down a little bit and maybe primer it again, sand it again, and then it'll be ready to take on paint. So I just want to show you guys where I'm at with the landing legs. And you'll notice something's missing right in that spot, and you'll notice it's missing on this one and the other two as well. So what I want to share with you guys is I received an incredibly awesome suggestion from Don over at Retro Rockets, and he suggested, which makes perfect sense, especially those of us that live out in the desert Southwest, rubber bands will dry up and get brittle and crack and break on you over time. And seeing as though I want this rocket to last as long as it possibly can, he recommended that I get some springs for it, and I thought that was a tremendous idea. So I got online and I looked and I found a company that sells 5/8 inch tension, I couldn't think of the word, tension springs. And so you can see that the spring works as you pull, then it retracts, as opposed to a compression spring, which is like a shock absorber. This works the opposite. So I was able to get a bunch of these in a little bulk pack. So these are the exact same length as the rubber bands were. Then he made another suggestion that you know, the thin little wire that's on this spring eventually could dig into that wood and may make its way through the dowel over time. So, you know, with years and years of it constantly being pulled on that dowel right there. So I took a piece of just regular electrical wire, smallest I could get, probably 26 gauge, and I stripped maybe a ½ inch off, and I just wrapped the insulation. I pulled the wire out and wrapped the wire insulation around the metal. So that's going to give a little bit of cushioning for the spring when it's on the dowel. I'll go ahead and put it on now so you can see how it looks. But that's the way it's going to sit. And this will be our retract tensioning spring to pull the gear back down. Every time it lands, it's going to compress upward, and this will pull it back down. So anyway, thanks and a huge shout out to Don. I'm going to include his video or his channel description in my description, so you can get a link to it and go check him out and subscribe to his channel. So thank you, Don. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. The other thing I'm still waiting on is the hinge. If you guys remember, we made up these hinges with the rubber fuel tubing and the little plastic ball. And although for short term that's a great solution, again, over time it's going to get hard, brittle, and crack. And see, the problem is, once these items are embedded in the body of the rocket, you know, you're never going to be able to access them again. So you want to make it as foolproof as you can before you permanently install these. So what I've decided to do is abandon that plan, and I'm going to go with an actual hinge that works off of a carbon fiber coupler that's going to slide over the 1/8 inch dowel here. So I'm still waiting on the carbon fiber shaft. Once it gets in, I can cut those pieces, and I will show you in a very soon segment to follow how I did that. So again, just waiting on the mail to deliver those, and we'll proceed. So just want to give you an update. I'm going to go ahead and continue primering the rest of these. Okay? Okay, as you can see, I've done quite a bit outside of filming, but this was pretty straightforward. I just glued the 3 sections that we'd already pre-assembled together, and in order for them to line up, having the notch all in line, I did use the body tube with the launch lug, and I just ran it up through each bulkhead, lining up each section. So that's taken care of. We're going to come back to this in 1 minute, but I want to show you one other thing. The base piece that's going to glue on the bottom of the main body, I went ahead and made marks on the perimeter as to where each of the landing gear mounts is located. And when you do this, you want to make sure, identify one, make sure one is identifiable, so when you glue them back in, when you glue it in permanently, they will be all lined up to one another. For example, this one, I had a little number 1 with the circle, and right here I've got a little number 1 with the circle, so I know that when this is reassembled that they're going to line up in that fashion. So you want to make sure you mark at least one as a reference. Now, before I make my slit into each of these bases, I did glue in a little piece of dowel. What's interesting is the manual says that you need to cut it from the 1/12 inch dowel. I have never seen a dowel labeled 1/12 of an inch, but I'm going to assume that that's the one they're talking about. And you're supposed to cut it 3/8 of an inch wide. These are 1/4 inch slots, so you're going to have about a 1/16 of an inch overlap. So once these harden, they are glued, but they're still a little bit wet. When they harden, then I'm going to go ahead and cut the notch down to the point of the dowel. So while this is drying though, I do want to go ahead and get to this piece. And now that like I said, the strut mounts are glued on permanently, I'm going to cut the remainder of that little, you can see them inside here. I'm going to cut the remainder of this off, so then this will eventually slide down onto the motor tube, the back bulkhead, everything. So I'm simply going to just very carefully cut through the cardboard. There's one, and if I can do the same on this one, we'll be in business. There we go. So that's one off. So now this will be able to slide directly over the landing gear assembly. And while I'm going to do the rest of these off camera, but I want to show you the legs before they're finally glued in. They are finally painted. You saw the last clip of the painting, the airbrushing of the orange, and I went ahead and painted silver on the strut cover and the landing pads. So I do want to show you though one difference that I did. I made mention of it earlier, but I did replace the fuel tubing and ball hinge with carbon fiber tubes and little, these are actually Dubro mini RC airplane hinges that I cut to fit about maybe 3/16 of an inch long, and then I took a 1/8 inch, I think it's like 5mm carbon fiber tube, and made a coupler to slide over each attachment. So these are epoxied in, so when you glue these on though, make sure they are, like, rotate this until it's straight, and then the hinge should be in line with that. That's the way you want. Here's an overhead view. You want to make sure it's in line with the leg. You don't want it rotated, you know, this direction or that direction. So these are all done. Once I get these little slits cut, then I'm going to mount this up in there, and that's going to give me alignment for permanently gluing these dowels into their respective slots. So again, I'm just kind of waiting for this to dry. In the time being, we can still continue to cut these out. I find it easier actually to push. There we go. And I'm going to go back over and clean these up with the little sanding stick, just to make sure they're flush on the inside, because you don't want any little tabs sticking out that could catch the landing gears. So there. So I'm going to take a little sanding stick and clean up those joints there. But yeah, there we go. Making progress. Okay, I want to point something out to you. I was just doing a dry fit of all the assembly parts, and building the leg stock as per the instructions. And I think I showed you I use those springs instead of the rubber bands, and they work. You know, the system works. Problem is though, the dimensions that they give you to cut, I'm going to show you which one I'm talking about here. This hinge support dowel, this top one right there, if you cut that to length, it puts the arm, it puts each leg at a certain distance up the tube, and literally that's as far down as the leg can go. And it's equal all the way around. They're all the same. And I'm not sure if you can see the angle on camera, but that's as wide as it gets. But if you look at the manual, let me show you the cover. It's also the same picture on the box. Look at the angle of the legs in the picture compared to the actual angle. These are a lot more, they point down a lot further, where these look like they're already compressed. And once I get the baffle and the engine on, there's minimal, I'm talking minimal ground clearance. I don't know if you can see the angle, but imagine the motor here and draw a line from this leg to that leg. There's not a whole lot of ground clearance. Yet when you look in the picture, there's a substantial amount of ground clearance. So, and another thing too is look at the angle that these pads, they're nowhere near level with the ground. They're already canted up a little bit. So what I propose, and what I'm probably going to do, is even though I cut those dowels to length for the template, I think I'm going to cut this upper portion off, which will in essence allow the leg to rotate even further down. It's going to allow this more movement this way because this dowel is going to be further up in that joint. And also by doing that, it's also going to put a little bit more tension on the spring, which is going to make it a little bit stronger. I mean, you can see how it actuates. It works. It works splendidly. I just don't like how flat it is sitting, especially if you look at the picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that top portion of the dowel off, which is basically going to put this coupler butting up against that bottom bulkhead, if that makes sense. So by cutting this 1/2 inch off here, I'm alleviating this space here, so this coupler is going to glue up to that bulkhead, which may actually give me a little bit more strength. So it may not be a bad thing overall. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make it sit a little bit taller and give me a little bit more movement in the hinge. So I'm going to do that and get right back to you. Okay, I want to show you something I came up with here. I did cut those legs. You can see that top portion is missing. So when I slide it up to fill that void, now the carbon fiber tube butts up against that bottom bulkhead, which is the exact distance we want. But here's the problem I see is that spring is under constant tension, so it's going to constantly want to pull that back. See, if I wiggle it, it doesn't necessarily want to stay back up. It does want to naturally pull it back down. So what you're relying on is glue at that joint, at that joint, and at that joint there. And that more than likely will work. But just one extra precaution that I'm going to take is I'm taking I guess they're 1/16 inch wheel collars that RC airplane guys use on landing gear and hold wheels on and stuff. And I had to drill it out to fit the 1/8 inch dowel, because typically this is how small they are, and that's not going to fit a 1/8 dowel. So I drilled that out to 1/8, slid it into that middle section there, run it all the way up to the bottom, and then tighten that set screw. And I'm still going to apply glue at all the joints, but that set screw is going to 100% prevent any possibility of that little dowel coming back down. So see, it's holding itself, and I'm feeling much stronger tension on that spring. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up the other 3 by drilling out. See, they naturally want to pull out. This one here pulled out on me. It's just that tension of the spring. So I'm going to use those wheel collars to help alleviate it. Do they weigh a little bit more? Yeah, they do. But for me, it's peace of mind knowing that I'm never going to have an issue with the landing gear, with the addition of the springs, the hard hinge, and the wheel collars. I'll never have to break this open and repair anything on the inside. So that's kind of the goal here. So anyway, I'm going to continue doing the other 3 and we'll get back to you. Okay, now that everything is set up and I've got all of the hinges installed, I've got the wheel collars installed on all the posts, holding everything steady. You can kind of see there up close how all the wheel collars are in. All of our glue is set up. All the hinge actions work. And yeah, one additional thing you'll note is because I replaced the springs, well, the rubber bands with springs, the rubber bands were to be anchored back here, but I didn't like that angle on the spring, so I drilled a hole closer in, and it's more of a vertical tension on the spring than horizontal and then down. So I don't know, just a little bit different angle on the spring action. I think it's going to work out a little bit better. So, and the reason I'm showing all this up close is because once we get the, what they call the parachute tube or the main body tube glued on, everything between these outer rings is going to disappear. We will see the hinges, but of course once we cover up with the main body, then they'll disappear also. But this will be our last chance to really get a good look at the innards of it before we seal it up for good. But that is our next step. So now we're going to take some wood glue and we're going to glue the tube onto the engine ring. And you'll notice it only goes one way because there's a hole down at the bottom for the launch lug to pass through. So we want to make sure that we get it in that orientation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take some wood glue. And coat a popsicle stick. And again, it's a little bittersweet because all that hard work we put into making that piece, you know, pretty, it's going to be covered up now. This glue is not wanting to come out, so let me just take the cap off. I think it's time for me to get a new bottle anyway. This one's starting to get a little low. Sorry, I was doing most of that off camera. Apologize for that. Okay. Now, I do want to be careful and make sure that the shock cord doesn't touch the glue. So I'm going to pass that down as quickly as possible. Okay. Work that on, and you want the bottom ring 1/16 of an inch up, so right about there. Okay, let's make sure our launch lug is centered in the hole. There it is. Looks good. Again, 1/16 of an inch, and looks like we got a nice fillet built up on the front, which is perfect. That's going to help us keep everything in place. So now the hard part, waiting for it to dry. So once this dries, then we'll start working on getting the main body. We also have to glue some gussets in for support. We'll do that again after the glue dries. I don't want to mess with it too much now. We'll just we'll let it sit for a bit and we'll be right back. Okay, a couple quick updates before we end up gluing the actual body on. I did show you the modification I made to the springs, and I did a double modification. And by that I mean I liked what I did, but I didn't like it enough. And I liked the tension that was on it, but I felt like it was a little too light, because when I started putting weight, for example, sliding the body tube on, dry fitting it, the weight of that itself was allowing the rocket to kind of push down and compress the shocks. So what I did do was I added a second spring by utilizing the initial hole that you're supposed to use, and by basically doubling up the spring, I'm increasing my tension on the landing gear. So it'll take more weight now to actually compress the gear, which in the right circumstances could create a bouncing tendency, but I think with the weight and everything on board, it'll act more like a shock absorber. So I'm willing to sacrifice the springiness in order to be able to sustain the weight, so it doesn't sit, you know, compressed. So anyway, that's one major thing. Here, I'll kind of zoom in so you can see what I did. But I'm running 2 springs in there now. I also installed the bottom shroud over the motor mount. That was just simply wrapping the embossed plastic paper in a disc and then gluing in the centering ring around that and sliding it over the launch lug. Now that's going to be cut off flush near the end. I also built up the engine shroud. The only problem with it is the bottom of the shroud makes contact with my dowels on the bottom, so it doesn't go down as far as I'd like it to go. It comes up just a little short. So I'm gonna have to devise something to help hold the motor mount centered inside the engine shroud. So, but that'll be not a big deal, but I'll worry about that here in a little bit. But before we do glue the body on, we do need to glue the gussets in. And I'm just gonna do one for example in the video, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So we're gonna do one right now. But this is simply gonna glue right in between 2 of the landing gear on each side. And kind of like we do when we glue our fins together, I'm gonna glue both edges, and then I'm gonna make contact with the surface. Oops. And then pull it off and let it sit for a minute so it gets tacky. Then when I do glue it down, it'll hold itself in position. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball this for now. It doesn't have to be real precise. You're literally never going to see this again anyway. But there, I'm just going to set that in there like so. And let it sit. Now, you know, I may not even worry about pulling the next few out, because they do kind of hold themselves the way it's pinched in there. But for the sake of the first one, I'll go ahead and do it that way. But no, everything's coming along nicely. Not a whole lot to do after I get these glued on. Then I can glue the body tube on. Then we can again work on this engine shroud. And the other thing I need to do is paint this black before I glue it on. And the nose cone. Now this needs to be sanded down, painted, you know, primed, painted, all that good stuff as well. But that's just a minor thing. I'm not overly concerned about that. So, all right, this has had some time to set up now. Let me slip this back into position. Lay it down, and there we go. So that takes care of that one. I'm going to do the other 4 off camera, and then we're going to start working on this shroud and trying to figure out how we can make it fit better around the engine mount. So let me finish these up and we'll get back. Okay, this is kind of a big moment now. The gussets have dried, and in addition to just simply sliding this on, I did a test fit earlier, and the cutouts in these bulkheads down here for the launch lug put a little bit of a strain on the launch lug, and it actually caused a little bit of a twisting. And then looking down the lug itself, there was a little bend in it, and that would cause problems in the future when it comes to, you know, coming off the launch pad smoothly. So I enlarged the notch a little bit. I don't know if you can see that little opening there, and then down at the bottom one down here too. I enlarged it a little bit so I can put a little bit of a twist in it to get the launch lug straighter and to take that stress off. So now that I've done that, it is ready to glue on. One other thing I noticed is that I'm gonna have to cut, well, I'm gonna have to cut it, but it's more like shaving off maybe a 1/16 of an inch off the top of this, because it's a little tight, and when the cardboard tube gets up to it, it just doesn't go up as far as I'd like. It does bottom out at the bottom, so I'm not gonna have any problems with that, but I am gonna have to trim off a 1/16 of an inch. But what I'm gonna do is wait till everything's glued in there. Then I'm gonna use this kind of as a cutting guide, and I'm just gonna run my blade around the top of the tube while it's in here. That may be hard to kind of comprehend or visualize, but you'll see what I'm talking about when I actually do it. But the time has come where I've procrastinated long enough. It's time to glue this on and get this going. So once this sets up, then we're in the last stages of getting this rocket ready to fly. So I'm going to take out my wood glue, Now I am going to put I'm going to run a ring of glue on this bulkhead, but instead of running it on that bulkhead, I'm actually going to put the glue for that one on the cardboard tube itself. Because if I put it on this bulkhead, it's just going to get pushed up and out of the way. So let me run a bead on the inside here. Tell you what, that's going to be hard to do. I'm going to take a popsicle stick and run it on that. Not going to be very easy to show you on the camera. And I apologize, you're probably missing out on what's going on there, but I'm basically just running the glue on the inside perimeter of, not perimeter, but the inside ring for adhesion. Okay, so that's there. Now I'm going to put another ring. I can do this manual. Let me get kind of eyeball where it's going to be at. Right around in this area here. More or less. Oops. Might have put a little too much on, but that's okay. We'll smear it around. I just want to make sure we get full coverage. There. That's definitely going to be enough to cover everything. Get a paper towel. Now, after test fitting it, I do know that we're going to have a little bit of difficulty when it comes to getting this. I just put my fingers in that bead of glue. We're going to have trouble getting the glue or getting this compressed inside the tube, but we'll get it. It'll take a little trial and error. So let's go ahead and get this started first. And say bye to my inner workings there. We're never going to see that again. At least we hope not, if all goes well. That's a tight fit, but that's good. Wipe that glue. I also want to run a ream of glue on the inside of my perimeter here. That'll hold the front end of the body tube in position. And I gotta move this before it starts setting up on me. Okay. Actually, I want to run the glue. Okay, don't do what I did, guys, here. Put the glue on the inside before you start to slide everything in, because this is going to make it tricky to get the glue in. I'm having to do some of this off camera, but I'm kind of up against the time crunch now. I got to get this on. And I'll get my finger in there, spread it with my pinky. There we go. Clean your fingers, because you definitely don't want to get glue on your outer perimeter while you're doing this. Okay, this is where it's going to start getting tight. And it is tricky to try to wedge this ring inside the tube. Okay, we got that side. There we go. All right, everything's in position. That's kind of wedged up front. You can see it's, well, I'm gonna have to hold it to kind of compress that. So I'm gonna hold that for a while. Let me clean up some glue before it starts to set up on me, and then I'm gonna off camera just hold that piece on while the glue sets up. And once the glue takes hold, then we'll be fine. I want to look down the launch lug and make sure we don't have any twist in there either. Okay, we're good on that. So I'm just going to hold this up in there until it sets up, and we'll be in shape. Okay, we finally made it to the final step in the build, and that is applying the decals. Now, before I actually start applying them, I want to show you kind of some last minute things I've done on the rocket in preparation for this moment. And the other thing is, I've also moved indoors. It's just gotten so blazing hot outside that the garage is unbearable, so I decided to make a little makeshift workshop in the house where I can apply the decals and be a little bit more comfortable. So that's where I'm at. I'm indoors now. You might hear the sound a little bit different, and the surroundings are obviously different as well. But these are water slide decals, and I'm going to cut these out here in a minute and prepare them for putting them on the rocket. Here is a picture of the instruction sheet, and that's what we're going to mimic. So we're going to apply the decals in that fashion. One thing I do want to show you, and it's a little tight quarters here, but when I glued the body on, the main shroud on top of the parachute body, there was a little bit of a twist in the whole mechanism. So the launch lug ended up being a little off-centered, and in order to make a straight shot, you can see through the hole there, I had to elongate the cutout on the right hand side in order for it to fit. Before I did that, you would not be able to see daylight through that lug, and obviously that would bind up on the launch rod. So to keep that straight, I had to do a little bit of a cutout on the right side. And let me show you the bottom. The bottom is all complete now as well. I've got the base shroud wrapped around. In fact, I'm going to show some photos here in a second of how I masked things off in order to be able to paint this after all this has already been painted. I'll show you some pictures on that. But basically what I did was I took a paper towel tube and I stuck some popsicle sticks in a crosswise fashion through it, and I mounted this in the upper body tube, like so. Then what I did was I took rubber bands and I wrapped a rubber band around each of the popsicle sticks and the bottom of the legs, which enabled me to be able to pull all 4 legs up at the same time. And then I wrapped, so once they were out of the way, then I was able to wrap the whole body with a plastic bag, taped it down so only this part was exposed. Then I went ahead and spray painted it white. Not the best paint job, not the best prep job, but I'm kind of at that point in the build where it's like I just want to get it done. That's a horrible thing to say, but I think we've all been there. I also did the cutout for the launch lug at the bottom. Now I also had to elongate the hole just a little bit to get it to line up also. So a little bit of tweaking is possible, so don't be dismayed if you see the launch lug has a little curve to it. That can be fixed by elongating the hole cutouts for these. And then I also glued the engine on itself, so this was pretty straightforward, and that's after I had already painted it black ahead of time. So that's kind of what I've done since the last segment you saw. And I have the nose cone out drying outside. It was just simply primered, sanded, and now a base coat of white is put on, and it's going to match the same as the body here. So while that's drying, I thought this would be a great opportunity to get the decals on, and then we're done. And this thing is about ready for its maiden flight. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera, cut these out, get them ready, and maybe I'll apply 1 or 2 decals on film, and then I'll show you the final reveal here at the end. But for now, I'm going to show you a couple quick photos of how I masked the bottom off to paint it and got these supports up and out of the way. Okay, I've got all the decals cut from the sheet and they are ready to apply. I've got a little dish of water here next to me that I'm going to dip them in to get the adhesive to break free from the paper. And I'm going to do the first few. Let's do the front center portion here just to show you how they go on, and then I'm going to do the rest of them off camera because a lot of it's going to be duplication. And basically there's two of everything. In other words, there's going to be two decals for the front that'll mimic the ones on the back. There's two sets for the side which will mimic the other side as well. So if you see it kind of an angle, you're going to see all the decals from this angle, and then you're going to see all the other decals from that angle. So that's the way it's set up. I'm going to use the instruction sheet as a guideline as to where to put the decals. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with the down here. There's a black and white kind of a checkered, elongated checkered section. So I've got one of those cut out here, and it's going to lay just about right in there. So let's go ahead and get that started in the water. You can see it already curling up there. And I've got Q-tips and paper towels ready to go. And Q-tips are really helpful because it gives you a way to gently squeegee out the water while kind of rolling it down flat. So it's kind of a pretty cool little simple process. So I'll just get that to break free. What I may do is if you look over here on the left, the bottom, the main decal, maybe one of the little black dots and the blue little stripe there, I'll do those four on this stream or in this segment, and then I'll do the rest off camera. So okay, it's breaking free now. I also want to apply just a little bit of water with my finger to the surface to give it something to slide around on. Okay, set it down and then slide the back out from underneath it. Okay, and kind of position it, work it around. Again, using my illustration on the manual as a guideline. That looks pretty good. Grab a Q-tip. Before I do the Q-tip, I'm actually just going to kind of blot with the paper towel some of the other excess water so it doesn't start dripping around on me. Okay, now I'm going to take my Q-tip, starting in the middle and just kind of rolling out, pushing the water and any air bubbles out as we go. Initially, you always want to roll the Q-tip. You don't want to just slide it because that'll actually slide the decal around. Once you get the water and the air out from underneath it, then you can be a little more aggressive with it and not worry about the rolling motion. But initially, you definitely have to roll it. I'm sorry, I'm doing a lot of that off camera. This is a very large rocket when you're working in a tight space. So, okay. I like it. All right. Now I'm going to take one of these decals, one of the main logos, drop it in the water, let it soak, and it's going to be pretty much dead center on this panel, below the shroud and the stripes. So it's going to be right in the middle there. And the other, let me go ahead and get the other decals ready. One of them is this little blue guy. It says Semroc Astronautics. I don't know if that's clear. Yeah, there it is. So that's going to go kind of up in the upper left here, and then a single black dot right in the middle. Okay, let's see if this is broken free. Not quite yet. There it goes. Okay. Again, I'm going to kind of moisten the area. Angle this up a little bit. Get my decal out of the water. Lay it down. Pull out the backing. Blotch it out. Okay. Now I'm just going to, with my finger, kind of center it, move it around, slide it to position. I think that looks good. Just gently tap. Let the water absorb into the paper towel. Don't try to push down on it. That's just asking for trouble. Okay, Q-tip starting in the middle. Again, just rolling. Rolling, rolling, rolling. And now that you've got most of it rolled out, then, like I said, you can be a little more aggressive and just start sliding it over the decal. And it's probably not going to move on you. Okay. And just kind of wipe up any excess water that can be absorbed into the Q-tip. Okay, there we go. Let me get my next little guy started in the water. And also I'm going to grab a single dot, one of these black dots here, and put it in the water too, get that started. Okay, these are applying very nicely. I'm not quite sure who prints up the Semroc decals, if they do it themselves or a contractor, but it's quality paper, quality decal. I'm really liking the way it's going on. Okay, I can adjust this back down a little bit. So we've done, obviously, these two. Now we're going to do that little black dot and the blue stripe. Okay, let's see if the stripe is, it's free, okay. So a little bit of moisture. No, don't grab my finger. This happens sometimes. Let me grab my tweezers. Okay, sometimes I would rather stick to your finger than the surface. Okay. Now I can slide it around to where I want it. Okay, it looks like it's nestled right up near that corner up there. Okay, looks level. Pan this up a little again. And again, just using your Q-tip. Lightly roll. Okay. And like I said, you can be a little more aggressive once it kind of holds in position. Okay, looks good. Now for our little dot. This one I'm optimistic it won't be overly complicated. It's just a little black, whoops, well, if I don't drop it. Okay. Okay, this one goes just barely down and to the right of the rectangle we just applied. There. That looks good. Alright, so we've got the front face complete. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the decals off camera, and I will show you the final product. Okay, the Mars Lander is complete. I've got all the decals on, clear coated. The nose cone you see is dried now. And yeah, let me kind of zoom in on all the decals. Kind of rotate it here so you can see all the work. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. Maiden flight should be here later this week. So keep your eyes open for a launch days video, and you'll get to see the maiden flight of this. I could not be more pleased with it, and you can see the spring action works. Here, I'll drop it a little bit, and it's a little springy, but that's okay. I'd rather it be too springy than not springy enough and it kind of jar and break. So yeah, excellent build. It was a challenge. It's probably the most challenging kit built that I've done yet, but and it's far from perfect, but sometimes good enough is good enough, and that's where this falls into that category. So excellent build. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something, and some of my modifications maybe you might want to implement in your next build as well. So again, glad you enjoyed watching it, and I hope you stay tuned for the upcoming flight video on a launch day. Take care, everybody. God bless. Bye-bye.